Hi guys, it's Mrs. Ayuso. Welcome to my live lesson recording for this week. We are going to be looking at how to identify theme in narratives. And this is a really fun live lesson in particular because you're going to have the opportunity to do an interactive activity and watch a Disney animation in order to complete this live lesson. So let's go ahead and get started because I'm really excited about the content we're going to cover. So our learning goal today is through group discussion. We want you to be able to understand the plot and identify the theme of a visual narrative by analyzing the characters. So sometimes learning goals can have some pretty wordy phrases in it, so let's break this down. So typically if you were attending a live lesson, you would be working with other students. Since you're watching a recording, I want you to grab a sibling or a parent or a friend and complete this live lesson together so that you can have somebody to bounce your ideas off of. So with your partner, whoever you choose, you are going to, hopefully at the end of this lesson, be able to understand the plot and identify the theme of a visual narrative or a cartoon by analyzing the characters and what they go through. So before we get started, I want you to check yourself on our learning scale. There are 4 levels to every learning scale, and we use this so that you can self-identify how comfortable you are with the content. So we're talking about understanding narrative plot and identifying the theme of a story and analyzing characters. So if you're a level 1 right now, you're unsure of how to identify a narrative's plot or theme, and that's completely okay because you're going to get some practice doing that today. If you're a level 2, you can understand a narrative's plot, but you're not sure how to identify theme. Also okay. If you're a level 3 already, which means that you're relatively competent with this skill, you can understand a narrative's plot and identify the theme by analyzing the characters. And hopefully by the end of this lesson, you will at least be able to achieve a level 3. And if you are a level 4, you can write a well-developed paragraph explaining a narrative's plot and identify the theme through character analysis. Basically, this means that not only do you understand it all, you can explain it in a well-written paragraph. So again, by the end of this lesson, we want everyone to at least be at a level 3. So before we go any further, I want you to pause this video and you are going to log into Nearpod. You are going to type into your web browser join.nearpod.com and you're going to use the code OHBKS in order to log into that lesson. So go ahead and take a second to complete that. Pause this video. Work your way through the activities. They're very short and easy just to kind of quiz your knowledge on plot. And at the end, it's going to provide you with a really great Disney animation that you're going to use for the rest of this live lesson. So go ahead and take care of that now, and I'll see you when you get back. So I hope you enjoyed that Nearpod activity, and I also hope you enjoyed that Disney animation. The Firebird Suite is one of my favorite Fantasia cartoons. I love it, and I love how complex it is and how beautiful the animation is. So we're actually going to use that to practice understanding plot, character development, and finding theme through the course of this live lesson. So let's review plot. Based on the Nearpod activity, you probably got a little bit of a heads up on this already, and you may have seen a plot diagram like this before, but just so that we can review it together, plot is going to be the structure that is used to tell a narrative or tell a story. Plot is always going to have some of the same basic tenets. Your exposition, which is always the beginning of a story, introduces your protagonist, your good guy, your antagonist, your bad guy, your setting for time and place. So it's always going to basically tell you who and where and when things are happening. You're also eventually going to figure out the conflict through the course of this plot, which is the problem. Rising action are the events that start amping up the action and leading to the climax of a story, which is the most exciting part of the narrative. The way I like to look at it is it's when the protagonist has to look their conflict in the face and do something about it. The falling action are the events that take us down to the resolution, which is where the story ends and the author or the animator in this case finds some way to wrap the story up with a bow. By the end of this, when you look over the plot, you should be able to identify the author's theme, which is going to be the life lesson or the moral of the story, and maybe look at some symbolism in the story as well. So what we're going to do is, after having watched the Firebird Suite animation, we're going to be able to identify this animation's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So let's talk about the exposition. You and your partner need to think about, after having watched this cartoon, who are the characters? What is the setting? And what is the conflict? Go ahead and pause the video and talk with your partner about who these characters are, where the story is taking place, and what the conflict is. Now let's move on to the rising action. As I've already stated, the rising action is where the author or the animator starts bringing certain events into play that amp up the conflict and the tension. It grabs your attention about what's going on in the story, it gives some color to the characters, it makes the conflict very stressful for you as the reader or the viewer, and it leads you up to the climax. So I want you to pause with your partner for a few minutes and talk about where you think there might have been some rising action. So after the exposition of the Firebird Suite, when we have seen the little pixie flying around bringing spring in this mountain, beautiful landscape, think about what events start leading to the conflict of this volcano exploding. Now that you've identified a few pieces of rising action, we are going to talk about the climax. So as I've already stated, the climax is the part of the story where your protagonist basically has to come head on against the conflict and do something about it. This looks very different depending on the type of story you're looking at. Sometimes it's very terrifying, sometimes it's triumphant, sometimes it's Captain America staring a villain in the face and killing him and winning, and other times it may look like defeat, but basically it's the highest point of action in the story. So think back to the Firebird Suite animation that you just watched. Think about the music, think about the animation, and consider, where do you think your protagonist, which is the little pixie or sprite, where did she meet the climax at its highest point? So when did she face her conflict, which would be this volcano bird monster, the Firebird, head on? Now that you have identified the climax of this animation, which for some of you may be when she gets swallowed by the Firebird itself because she has faced it face to face, you may find that she feels like she's defeated. As you can see in this snapshot from the animation, she turns kind of gray and small and she's flaking all over the place, kind of like ash after a fire, and she's pretty sad about it. So this is where you could see on a plot diagram the actions start to decline towards a resolution in the animation. This is what we call the falling action. So I want you to pause with your partner and think about where or what kind of events happened in the animation after the climax that kind of lead us down from the resolution. So what events are happening? How is her character changing? What decisions are made? Now that you've identified at least 1 to 2 pieces of falling action, it's time for the last part of plot, and that is the resolution. As a reminder, the resolution is where the author, or in this case the animator, finds a way to tell how the story ends. Usually in a happy story, like this one is, the conflict ends up being resolved, and usually the character, you can tell that the character has learned something, or at least has a different outlook on their circumstances. So for a few minutes, pause this video and talk with your partner about how our protagonist, this pixie sprite goddess of spring lady, how has she resolved the conflict at this point? So think about, how does the story resolve? How does she feel? How has her outlook changed? And go ahead and discuss that for just a few minutes before moving forward. Good job! Now you have gone over the entire plot of the Firebird Suite animation, which is fantastic. So you have looked at the structure of the story and come up with some basic facts about the characters, the action, the climax, and even considered what the character may have learned through her experience. So now we've reached the part of the assignment where you need to identify the theme. And as a reminder, what theme is it's the life lesson or the moral of the story that the author, or in this case, the animator, wanted to tell you. So oftentimes, really anytime you read a story or watch a movie, you can always find something you can take away. So think about this story. In very basic sense, we have this fantastical fairy tale of a little sprite who is bringing springtime to a mountain area, but the mountain ends up exploding, and you have a firebird that comes down and burns up the entire forest and seems to conquer her. And even though she almost gives up, her friend the elk reminds her that, she's still there, and she gets up and she grows even stronger than she's ever been, and she's able to bring springtime to the entire mountain area, even on top of the mountain, regardless of the fact that the firebird had once lived there. So that's what happens in the story if you were to summarize it. So this is obviously a fairy tale. What I want you to do is pause the video and talk with your partner about what this story might mean. So your first step is to think about, what did she learn from her experience? And then what do you think the animator may have wanted you to learn from this story? And you can be as simple as thinking about what life lessons you may share in learning with the protagonist, or thinking about some of the symbols of what this animation may represent. So take a few minutes to discuss the theme of the story. So what is the life lesson or the moral of the Firebird Suite animation from Fantasia 2000? All right, good job. I hope you enjoyed this activity, and I hope that you were able to draw out a pretty meaningful theme for yourself from this animation. Disney always does a great job of not only providing beautiful animation and compelling storytelling, but they usually find a way to get you to think a little bit deeper, even with cartoons, which is why I love Disney so much. So now that we're at the end of this activity, we are revisiting our learning scale. I want you to take a minute to look over the 4 levels of the scale and figure out where you think you are after having practiced this skill with this lesson. Again, there are no right or wrong answers in terms of where you should be on a learning scale, but we would hope that by the end of practicing this skill, whether through the live lesson or practicing it more in your actual work for the course or in additional activities, we want you to at least be able to understand plot and identify a theme by looking at what the characters are going through. If you're level 4, you can articulate your ideas in a well-developed paragraph. So speaking of paragraphs, in order to get credit for participating in this lesson, you are going to write a short paragraph summarizing the plot of the Firebird Suite animation and identifying what you think the theme is. So as a reminder of what should be expected in a paragraph structure, you need to start with a topic sentence. That means you need to introduce the name of the animation, which is the Firebird Suite, and it's by Disney's Fantasia 2000 film. And you need to state the theme. So what you have decided the theme is, you should state that in the topic sentence right off the bat. After that, you need to give a brief summary of the plot. So tell me who the characters are, what they're going through, and what happens at the end. And then you're going to choose at least one piece of evidence from the story to show the theme that you have decided. So if you think that this story shows that life will always conquer death, that's fantastic. You need to, after having summarized the animation, you need to explain how the story shows the theme that life always conquers death. And then you need to end it with a conclusion sentence, just like any good old paragraph. You are going to submit this paragraph either to your collaboration assignment in your assessments list. You can put it in the student comments box, or if you've already completed your collaboration and just want extra credit, you can submit it in your course's either blank assessment or enrichment assessment. Again, just pop it in the student comments box and send it to me. Make sure you proofread your work before submitting it, otherwise I'll send it back to you. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you have any further questions or comments about finding plot, character development, or theme, please call, text, or email me. Thanks, guys, and I hope to talk to you soon.